Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1920A, and today's date is July 18th, 2019, and the title of the episode is, To be economically free, we must do this one thing. Now, before I get started, I wanted to talk about the Q coin. Have you heard about the new Q coin? Q has captured the mood of America and given a voice to a movement. You can now be a real part of that movement. This very special coin has deep meaning engraved in every space, from the 17 references to the lightning bolt, which is the key to another world. If you follow Q, this coin is a no-brainer for you. Go to greatawakeningcoin.com and use the code X22 Report to get $5 off when you buy 2 coins or more. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, when we talk about the economy, about draining the swamp, we need to remember that this is not just a short little stint where we say, okay, let's arrest a couple of people. Let's put some gold bugs on the Fed and hopefully everything just works out. This is much, much more than this. Because to be economically free, or free altogether, we need to do many different things. And I'm talking about we the people, Trump, the patriots. We just can't say, okay, you know what? We placed a couple of people in the Fed. Everything's okay. Let the central bank go ahead and do what they normally do. Let all the central banks around the world do what they normally do. Because this would not benefit the people. Actually, nothing would change. The only way to be economically free and free of all of this is that we need to get rid of the central bank. The private Western central bank needs to be removed. It needs to be dismantled. And I'll explain why a little bit later in this report. But I wanted to head out to the UK first because yesterday we mentioned Boris Johnson. He has the deal coming up October 31st, and prior to October 31st, we know that Parliament is not in session. And we said this would be a perfect time for Boris Johnson to move forward. Now remember, he promised to do this, or he has to resign. Now what's very interesting, we know that the EU and those within government, they are going to try to stop this any way they possibly can. Look what they did with May, with the deal there. It was not what the people wanted. So what did they do? Well, they knew that Parliament wasn't going to be in session prior to the October 31st date. So Parliament, and I believe they're not alone in doing this, there were certain influential individuals, probably from the EU, that said, listen, we need some type of an amendment to suspend anything that happens during this period of time. And that's exactly what happened. MPs in the House of Commons backed an amendment by a majority of 41, 315 to 274, which blocks the suspension of Parliament between October 9th and December 18th unless a Northern Ireland executive is formed. The vote is a blow for Johnson. And we know that he's not the prime minister yet, but he's the front runner to become the prime minister. And what they did was they suspended all of this. So Parliament will be there. And what are they going to do? They're going to try to block the October 31st no-deal exit. Remember, the EU and many individuals that side with the EU, they're not going to let this happen very easily, as you can see. This is why May tried to push the deal how many times? 4, 5, 6 times? And it failed every single time because it wasn't a people's deal. Boris Johnson, he's going to go up against the same exact thing. He's going to push, and the EU and certain individuals are going to push back. Remember, the central bank, the EU, they don't want the UK to leave. If the UK leaves, other countries are going to see this. Other countries are going to see how well the UK does. And when the UK prospers and does very well and makes trade agreements with the United States and other countries like Italy, Hungary, and the rest are going to say, hey, wait a minute here. Why don't we follow in their footsteps? And guess what happens to the EU at this point? It starts to fall apart. So the central bankers, They don't give up that easily, and we know this. But again, this is what this is all about. It's the fight until the very end. And we can never give, just like the central bank can't give. Trump is out there, the patriots are out there, fighting every single day to bring the people back in power. Now, here in the United States, we know that the real estate market is imploding on itself. And this is very big because a lot of people look at the real estate market, and this is a lot of the everyday person's wealth because houses appreciate. They say, wow, this is pretty good. I bought it at $100,000. Now it's worth $150,000. I just made $50,000. I'm feeling good. And hopefully by the time I retire, the house is worth a lot more. I paid off a lot of my mortgage, and I have a nice little nest egg. And what is happening here is that with this illusion, with this economic central bank illusion, everything is falling apart right now. And this is why Trump is calling for a rate cut. This is why he wants stimulus. It looks like the central bank is following through, which they probably most likely will in the next couple of weeks. And once this happens, Trump, the patriots, they're hoping to keep everything stable. It's not going to fix the housing market. But what's very interesting about the housing market is that there were a lot of foreign investors invested in the market. Remember what the central banks have done. Once the real estate market came down, they pumped it back up. And all these foreign investors, hedge funds, investment companies, they all came into the market and bought these homes on pennies on the dollar. And then we had appreciation. These are the bubbles. Keep houses off the market. Buy as many as you possibly can. Don't rent them. Just keep them off the market. And when you keep houses off the market, it looks like everyone is selling and there's not that much inventory and people want it and prices go up. And foreign investors came in and they said, hey, this is a good way of making a lot of money off of homes. What do they do when the market hits the top? They sell. They don't want to hold on to this. They know what is happening, just like the stock market. Those inside investors, what do they do when the market hits the top? They sell. Now, can you gauge the absolute top? No. But when everything rises, they take their profits. Well, it's happening in real estate right now. Purchases by resident foreigners plunged by 43%. Purchases by non-resident foreigners collapsed by 56%. In total, that's around $77 billion. And purchases by all foreign buyers in the period between April 2018 and March 2019, that plunged by 36% from the same period a year ago and 49% from the period 2 years ago. They're understanding that the market is coming down. Now, rate cuts, stimulus, that might pump it up a little bit, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to make sure that the system does not collapse before the 2020 elections. This is why Trump is pushing this. Remember, we were talking about how the Fed was raising rates in 2017, 2018, and they were supposed to raise rates in 2019 because they were going to have the economy come down right before the election. Cue the Patriots. They reversed this. They took control. Now everything has been reversed. And the plan is to stabilize everything long enough for Trump to win the election, to say, we have made the economy great. Look at the stock market. Look at the unemployment numbers. Look at the GDP numbers. And these are the same exact numbers that the deep state, the central banks, have been using for a very long time to convince the American people and the world that the economy is absolutely fantastic. And in the meantime, what are the Patriots doing? They're creating a shadow economy to replace the central bank economy. Now, Mnuchin and Pelosi, they supposedly have made some type of deal on a top-line budget, and they're saying that they have a budget for year 1 and year 2. We'll have to see how this plays out, and actually, if there is a budget. Tell you the truth, at this point, it doesn't matter if there's a budget or no budget. The entire system needs to be reset and everything needs to be wiped out and a new economy has to be brought in. Now, remember, this is not about another 4-year election. It's just not about arresting some individuals. It's about changing what the central bank, what the deep state, the mainstream media has done over the many, many years to the United States. And the only way to do this is to stop the central bank system. How does the deep state, the central bank, keep control of everything? It's the reserve currency. The reserve currency allows the deep state to control the rest of the world via sanctions. Trump is using sanctions right now to his advantage. And they're able to manipulate certain economies. The central bank has the ability to manipulate certain economies, prop up certain economies, fund different regimes. The IMF, which is controlled by the U.S., the deep state, allows them to control other nations via debt. They keep them in debt. They keep them under their control. Now, to stop all of this, there's only one way. We need to do away with the reserve currency. We can't have another reserve currency. We can't have another country take over the reserve currency, or the IMF or the top central bank be the reserve currency. Because if there is another reserve currency, that means whoever controls that reserve currency has control over the world. And this can't be. I believe what needs to happen is that each country needs to go back to their national currency. Remember what the central banks have done. They've infiltrated hundreds of countries around the world, placed them into debt, and they control each one of these countries. And the deep state, using the Federal Reserve, is able to control the rest of the world by placing sanctions, by making countries suffer until they do what we want. And this has to end. If this does not end, if this isn't stopped, nothing will change. Everything will stay the same. So Trump and the patriots, their ultimate mission is not just to take over the Federal Reserve, not just to nationalize the Federal Reserve and allow the people to control the Federal Reserve instead of a private corporation. Their main goal is to stop the entire central bank deep state apparatus, making sure that there's not one entity that is in total control of everything. Think about what the deep state was planning before Trump came into office. One world currency, one government. They were going to use the TPP to have different court systems sit on top of governments. They would overrule governments. If there's one currency, what could they do? Well, they could sanction one country and say, listen, you need to do what we want you to do. Get in line. This can't be. If we have nations using their own national currency, which is created by the people, there's not one entity controlling everything. It's called diversification. And this has to be done. This is why your financial person says, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, with the central bank, there's central control. We cannot go back to central control. So this is the mission of Trump and the patriots. That's why this is just not about 4 years, 8 years, arresting a few people, exposing individuals. This is about resetting everything from government to mainstream media to Hollywood to the central bank, bringing the corruption out into the forefront, bringing what the central bank has been doing to the forefront and changing it for the betterment of the people. This is the ultimate goal, and it has to be done. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.